and welcome to the Digital Shift powered by Foxit. This is the show where technology leaders explore how innovation, AI, and smart workflows are reshaping the way we work. And I'm your host, Charles. We're going to go ahead and dive right in. My guest today is Alejandro Mainetto. Alejandro is a technology executive, an AI entrepreneur, and a partner at CXO Partners. As partner at CXO Partners, he advises mid-market and private equity-backed companies on how to modernize and transform their technology organizations and systems. As CEO of Scient One and Ellie, he leads an innovation digital agency focused on developing and implementing AI-based solutions across multiple industries and blending strategy, innovation, and empathy to drive meaningful impact. Alejandro, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Today, we're going to be talking about people before process, leading human-centered AI transformation. And I think we're going to go ahead and dive right in with augmentation versus automation. So we're going to be talking about what's focusing on replacement is usually the wrong approach when we're looking at implementing an AI strategy. So you said that companies should be focused on augmentation before they even look at efficiency. So why do you believe that's so important?
Yeah, so because in many companies, by the way, this is pretty common. Many companies make this mistake. I think if you focus solely on efficiency first, then you're risking potentially automating the wrong things. I think one of the things that many customers that I've talked to as well, they've realized the sort of hard way that if they focus on the efficiency first and the augmentation later, they also risk alienating the workforce because their approach is to sort of let's cut versus let's experiment, let's understand really what's going on, right? Augmentation, at the end of the day, is going to respect the human first, right? Is going to respect the human element. Is going to equip the teams. It's about equipping the teams with the right tools in order to sort of give them what they need, enhance their productivity, enhance their decision-making abilities, and really have them focus on higher level tasks because that's going to build trust and is going to pave the way for eventually at some point then to talk about sustainable efficiency, which may require to at some points talk about replacement, but not just let's go crazy with cost cutting.
And when we take a look at augmentation, this is a little bit of a slower process, isn't it? Well, I mean, obviously, it's going to be a slower process as compared to the thought process of just cutting everything and trying to shove efficiency right in the forefront. Um, and that means that when you're trying to implement something like this, there's probably going to be some pushback. So how do you handle that? How do you handle the pressure from boards or investors who want immediate turnaround and I hate saying it like this, but they sometimes they want that instant gratification.
Yeah, so I think that having worked through this with many CEOs and boards in past occasions, it's a whole concept that slower you may get further eventually, right? The delay gratification is definitely worth a while. Um, One of the key things that you need to learn how to develop as you do any sort of transformation, whether it's digital transformation or AI transformation, which is no different, is that you got to develop trust. And trust is earned, as you know, in leadership when they're going or taking a company through this AI transformation. That's one of the first things. And you don't gain trust when you immediately try to start cutting everybody left and right because of some new technology that at that point it may be unproven for the company, right? One of the things that I've done successfully is that I've tried to reframe the conversation with those CEOs and boards, which is you can always chase a quick win, I guess, if you really wanted to, but it's going to come at a price. It's going to come at an expense of really long-term adoption, and that's what you want, right? You don't want sort of people to just get enamored with some technology or some shiny object and then abandon it. because this transformation is supposed to be long lasting for the company, right? And transformative and changing. And so you wanted to make sure that this thing is sustainable and that it could last a long time. And the best way that you're going to be able to get that is through, if the CFO would tell you, I want to see some sort of an ROI, right? Um, and so we say that the first ROI is going to come through augmentation, right? Because you will see improved customer service. You will see, in whatever industry you may be, you will see improved automation, right? You will see increased productivity. But then that slower start is going to get you greater, longer term gains, right? And you just need to be willing to go along with that journey.
I know for an enterprise that makes even more sense because the bigger the organization, the longer it takes to turn. It's a big ship. It takes time to turn that big ship, and so you really want to make sure you've got everything in place because once you start to commit, it's really hard to then go back the other way. Um, Smaller companies, though, especially the really smaller ones, I'm talking about companies that may have only 50 to 100 employees. Uh, those might even be more of a challenge because so much of what they do depends on fast turnaround. They implement something and they need to see a result almost right away in order for it to make sense for them on those smaller scales. So do you find that this works for them just as well as it does for an enterprise?
I think that focusing on thinking about long term returns focus just as well for smaller startups, mid market companies, or the big firms, if you will. Um, the advantage that a smaller business would have is that they're much more nimble, so their execution time could be reduced because there's less people to sort of get agreement on, right? So rapid movement. They could react faster to a market change. Um, the problem is that I always say that the cowboy approach gets you in trouble too. Is that so in the past it used to be that whenever you wanted to develop a new software solution, the first thing they wanted to do was code, and let's jump into coding, let's jump into, but whether you're a small startup or you're a big company, the problem is that if you don't step back and actually talk about what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and what is that strategy and how do you align it, because that is one of the most critical things. You have to find alignment. Then yes, you may get there faster in terms of writing that software solution. The problem is that it may be completely the wrong one and nobody's going to want to use it. You probably heard countless stories about technology people developing solutions that in the end the users did not want to use, or they were building the wrong thing. And so it's the same scenario here in the same concept. So it's, you need to step back. You cannot skip alignment, and you need to be patient because the gratification, while it may be delayed, you will get there.
I see. Yeah, skipping alignment definitely is probably one of the most common pitfalls, right? That an executive might run into if they try to rush an AI deployment. Uh, have you seen other examples where rushing this stage led to pitfalls and led to, let's just call them outcomes that weren't very desirable?
One of them is getting started without figuring out whether they're ready to actually take on AI or not. And so one of the things that we work a lot with companies is on this, what we call a readiness assessment. So are you really ready as an organization to go ahead and take this on? Is your data ready? Is your culture ready? Are the right things in place for you to be able to take this on? Do you want to start attacking a problem from the customer point of view, or do you just want to focus on internal things first? All the right things that you need to be asking before you get started. So that's kind of one thing that we commonly see. The other one is that
That's really interesting. But before we move on, I have to ask: have you actually worked with any companies that, after taking this assessment, you've said you're not ready?
oh yeah, and that is not what they want to hear. But I rather, if I'm the CEO of that firm, I'd rather hear about that now than 6 months down the road or a year down the road, where I probably already wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever, right? Whatever amount I may have spent on either some pilot, right, that didn't go anywhere, or buying tools, which is the worst thing if you don't know really what you need to do. Um, the other thing that I was going to connect to that, and actually I was going to, it's a common thing, is that they don't really define the business problem clearly either, right? So AI is like a Swiss knife, right? It can solve a number of things, but but if you need to cut something, you're not going to do it with a screwdriver, right? You need a scissor, and so unless you define that problem clearly, um, you're going to end up using the wrong tool. Or at the end of the day, there's a lot of conversation these days about AI fatigue, and one of the reasons because there is AI fatigue is because everybody's talking about it, everybody wants to do something, expecting some miracle that is going to happen, and then when that doesn't materialize, the technology gets a black eye, right? And it's not the technology's fault. It's about not having done some of the right things that you need to do. So defining that problem clearly, what is it that you're trying to solve, and defining the right use cases that go along with that. So you could, as you experiment with a strategy behind you and not just in a fragmented fashion.
Now, some of those companies where you do the assessment and we determine, okay, you're not there yet, you're not quite ready. One of the things I know you would try to implement from there is reskilling, right? It's time for training. It's time to really understand what it is that you're getting into. So, what do you recommend for organizations that are approaching this reskilling so that they can move forward?
Yeah, so I think that there needs to be this concept of figuring out what do we want to do with our workforce before anything gets started, right? So sending everybody to become an AI modeling expert overnight is not going to work, right? And so you need to think about separate the soft skills from the technical skills, in quotes, or whatever you may want to retrain your workforce on. So, for example, let's take a warehouse or a manufacturing plant. It may or may not have robots today, or it may not or may not have AI powered machines or tools yet, but eventually it will. Somebody still needs to maintain those tools and equipment. Somebody still needs to maintain those robots. So as you retrain potentially some of that workforce, they may not need to become an AI developer overnight, right? So that's kind of an example on the hard skills. On the soft skills, one of the things that AI is going to take a really long time, we're hoping it's going to take a really long time, is in doing things like critical thinking, in doing things that are kind of what I would call the last step of the pyramid of the human type of skills, right? And so uh, we want to train and retrain and enhance the training of those folks that today I primarily focus on manual labor or tasks that are repetitive in nature. So we want them to sort of focus on other things that are gonna get them to eventually get placed on the jobs that will be created in the future. So you need to start kind of separating what are the goals, and those goals need to be realistic, because what may work for a manufacturer may not work for a media company, right? As you try to figure out who is it that you need to retrain and how are you going to do it. Um, so yeah, those would be some of the things that come to mind.
I worked for a company back during the pandemic when it first started, and it was a publishing company that had to then transition into a digital company in order to stay in the market. And we had several people on the staff who'd been there for quite some time, department heads, who couldn't make that adjustment, or they at least they had a really hard time with that. And I have to imagine that CEOs and CIOs are having the same issues now that we're transitioning to AI, where These are people who've been doing this same job for a long time. They know these routines. So getting them to move over to AI, you might not have the buy-in that you want from these department heads. So how do you deal with that when you're doing one of these reskilling programs?
There comes a time, and when we were talking about digital transformation, we were having actually a very similar discussion about, a conversation that started almost 14 years ago. Um, and the conversation was, if we don't provide digital literacy skills to our folks, they're not going to know how to, talk about um, social media and some of those channels that were, 14 years ago were still sort of, um, kind of being created. We're not going to know how to talk about, e-commerce. So for example, again, I'll use the example of warehouses and manufacturing again. uh, when we were talking about e-commerce and all the terminology and terms that at some point somebody in a warehouse needed to know in order to do their job effectively, there was no, well, do do I sign up for this or not, right? This is a proverbial, who's going to get on the bus and who's not. And I think that while digital transformation was sort of, something that even still companies to date have not even started yet, which is crazy, but it is a reality. When we start talking about transformation from an AI perspective, or going through AI transformation, um, this is going to be much more severe. And those that don't want to get on the bus because of whatever reason, one is because their belief system is different, or because they refuse to sort of comply, and they're really going to find themselves out of a job, very quickly. Because this time around there is no, well, I'll do it later, right? This time around we're moving 10 times faster than we were moving 10 years ago. And so if we don't sort of really try to focus everybody to sort of listen and work as a team and impart that knowledge and reskilling and upskilling, there's going to be an awful lot of bad discussions, soon, right? Somebody's going to be giving a report of the thousands and thousands of jobs that were lost. And by then it's going to be too late to start that reskilling, because there's going to be a gap. That this reskilling and retraining and people getting on board, it doesn't get done in 2 weeks or a month or 6 months, right? For some corporations, it could take a couple of years. And so if you wait to get started when sort of the report comes out of the, we've now lost 50,000 jobs to AI, then it's too late. Then you already lost the time, the precious time that you needed to sort of get on board. So it's going to be ugly unless companies really pay attention and they start listening. And those that don't want to get on the bus, then it's going to be a tough time for them.
They say that knowledge workers are pretty soon going to be separated into two categories: those who know and use AI and those who don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we talked about what success looks like from a high level. So what about from the ground level? So our knowledge workers and our teams. What does a successful augmentation look like from that point of view?
And that's going to vary, right? I mean, depending on what industry you're in. But one of the more common ones, right, that almost applies to any role that you're doing. It doesn't matter. It's on content creation, right? And what that means is, think of content in the widest possible broad sense, whether it's text, emails, you know, video, or or some combination of any of that stuff, right? Whether you need to write an email, develop a presentation, whatever you may be doing that requires some of that or some interaction with you, that ability to create content, right now you just got augmented 10 times what you were able to do before and what you're able to do now because of AI, right? And so automatically, those knowledge workers, that the more junior you are, the more augmented that you just got. And that's without doing a thing, right? The other day I wrote an article about the prompt culture and how prompting until recently, probably maybe a year ago, it was sort of a reserved term for technology people and technology people only, because everybody talked about prompt engineering in technology terms and what that meant versus other ways on how to interrogate and how to get information out of an AI model. And now, if you don't know how to really craft a prompt appropriately from that AI model, you're not really getting all the benefit and all the juice that you need to get out of that. And that all of a sudden, so prompt crafting just became a skill that didn't exist a year ago, really, so much. And when we talk about digital literacy or AI literacy in this case, this just became a skill that everybody needs to know. Um, and the more you know that, the more sort of the better that you will become at doing your job, whether it's content creation or content analysis, or whatever you may be trying to do, content, summarizing content, right? Per, whatever, providing a point of view, etc. And so I think that that's the entry level set of things. So, for example, we've been working with hospitality clients for a while, and when one of the things that we've been talking about is the augmentation is, for example, for either operational folks in a hotel or in a hospitality environment, or somebody in a front desk, for example. When we talk about augmentation, is imagine answering the thousands of questions that you get on a weekly basis or on a daily basis sometimes, in a property. Now multiply, if you're a large hotel chain, then multiply that times hundreds potentially, or even 50, and all of a sudden now you have all this time that where your hotel front desk was, they were responsible for answering those questions. Now this virtual AI assistant can do it for you, and now you could get augmented and actually focus on taking care of the most important part, which is taking care of the guest. And that now you're focusing on the guest experience. Now you're focusing on improving the customer experience from the minute that they step foot on that plane until they get to your property, and then by the time they leave, and now they become advocates of your brand, right? And it becomes sort of this infinite loop of great customer experience. And you could do that pretty easily today. And those are some of the things that we're seeing. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. I was just thinking when you were talking about content creation, just because that's what I do. Um, I saw a conversation between two different content creators who both did something very similar. They both created, blog content and social media content and all of that. One was utilizing AI, and the other was not. And their argument was, the one who wasn't was saying, "I create all of my own content," and the other one said, "Well, I do too. I just use AI to help me generate more of it." And the other said, "Well, when I use AI, it doesn't generate anything good. It's not really usable content." And the other said, "That's because you're giving it the wrong prompts."
Oh my God.
So I
you,
thought that was interesting.
you could get me on a soapbox to talk about that stuff, because I I cannot count enough folks that tell me every week, well, yeah, but that person's content was not fully developed by them. And I was like, yeah, good for them, because they probably just saved, instead of spending 10 minutes on that email, they would have spent an hour on that email. And now good for them, because they just got back 15 minutes. And at the end of the day, now it may be noise, but in a few months, who cares whether that email was composed with the help of AI or not? Those who care are the ones that are sort of playing the violin in the back, worrying about these details that no one else is going to care about very soon. And so it's like, why don't you try to do every math problem without using a calculator? Well, I guess I could, but I have my calculator. Why wouldn't I use it, right? Or
Right.
or I could, create a sheet of paper and do everything and try to do it what Excel could do for me in 5 minutes. Why would I do that? And those are the things that a lot of folks are talking about today. Well, your content is not as original as it could be. Did you write? That's okay. It's a tool, right? Just like you can use any other tool for whatever job you need to do. Um, Good for you for being able to use AI, as long as you the content and the core of the content continues to be your idea, and you're not just blatantly just copying and pasting everything. If AI is helping you refine that, and good for you, because that's what you need to be doing.
I want to circle back to something you had mentioned earlier before, which was trust, especially when we talk about leadership and how important that is. And uh, help me out with that. Walk me through that. The role you think leadership trust plays specifically in AI adoption.
I don't know, um, if you've been ever through an ERP implementation, but I got to tell you, it's one of those tough moments for every CIO that they ever go through in their careers, and sometimes they go through many. And and it's one of the toughest experiences because of the amount of change that there is, right? And so, and change in in any situation that requires a lot of change, it requires hand holding. People want to make sure that they're going to be okay, right, when there's a lot of change. um and and the same is with this technology transformations, right? I mean, people used to use the analogy of, uh, what would happen if your remote control was to go away. Do you remember those conversations, or around
Yeah, I remember those.
what would happen? Well, people would go crazy, right? Because now all of a sudden they don't know what to do. It's change, right? So anything like that that is sort of massive change, it requires somebody to guide you, and a lot of that is about trust. So I don't I won't let you tell me what to do necessarily, or listen to what you're saying, unless I trust that you're, trustworthy, and that you're somebody that I should listen to, and then that you're going to give me good advice. And so I think trust is everything, right? If employees don't believe their leadership, um, and that they have their best interests in mind, I don't think that sort of things end up working well. Any
Well,
transformation required.
then, if you do that, then your digital transformation suddenly feels more like a hostile takeover. It suddenly
Yeah,
feels like, oh, they're putting in these systems because they're going to get rid of half of us and they're going to
yeah,
try to automate all this stuff and push us away.
exactly, right. So it becomes sort of this. You're now you're threatening my job, right? In my existence, and there's a huge amount of distrust that goes in there. Um, the other thing that happens is that this stuff doesn't happen overnight, right? And so if something bad happened, and now you're in the process of earning the trust back from your employees, and every time that there is a layoff, or every time, right, and right now this is all over the news everywhere, right, or every time that there is some sort of a situation like that, a bunch of mistrust gets created into that, right? So companies are always in this sort of ebb and flow sometimes of, ensuring that they can maintain as much trust as they can with their employees. But as I was saying before, I think that leaders need to communicate often, clearly. They need to let their folks know, here's what's going to happen, and here's what we're gonna, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, here's how we're gonna experiment, and here's, if this goes wrong, we're gonna be prepared to deal with that. And here's some of the consequences, and by the way, here's what we're going to do about it. So in case something like this goes wrong, know that we have a plan in place in order to deal with that, right? I wrote an article recently about who needs to be leading the strategy behind this stuff, and in the digital transformation era, when you'd have asked me this some time ago, I always said the CEO needs to be the architect behind a company becoming digital and the transformation? And my answer is still not very dissimilar from that. I think if it's not the CEO, it needs to be the COO of the company, because um, so it's either the number one or number two person typically in the company that understand really the have the biggest peripheral view of what's going on across the company, across the impact that a tool like AI could have, right? So if they have a technology background, even better. They will always be supported by their CIO or CTO, obviously, but um, it is folks like that that need to drive this change, the transformation, but also the strategy.
One last thing. If you were addressing the CEO of a major company and you could give them three things, three pieces of advice, what would that be?
Yeah, the first thing that I would tell them is uh, ask for help. You know, don't try to do it all yourself. That would be the very first thing,
That is
because
not easy for C-suite. Let me.
yes, yes, absolutely. And I know that I talk to a lot of CEOs, and that's a common thing, is like, oh yeah, we're gonna do it internally. We got it. We not and this is not a technology. AI is not a technology project. Just the same way that digital transformation was not a technology project. This is more of a business. It's a business transformation and not a technology transformation. And so, ask for help. Recognize that you may not have all the skills internally. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I would tell them is find what is the right thing. What is the right business case and the right business problem that you're actually trying to solve. Um, so you know, don't just approve nilly willy all kinds of buying tools and people doing all sorts of pilots without having done some sort of a strategy first and defining what is that problem that we're after. So second is build some sort of a strategy, and then define what is the right thing that you're trying to go after. And three is be if you can, be the architect, be the biggest, rallier of troops of your company, because what you're about to go after here, it's not an easy thing, right? It's going to be an exciting time. Do it before somebody does it to you, right? So you have an opportunity here to transform your business and transform your company. Um, and the technology's here. We can do it, um, but it's going to require help. It's going to require assistance. It's going to require alignment, right? So don't skip it, right? Ensure that everybody's bought in, not just at your level, but also below your level, right? The executors of any strategy is going to be your management team, and then below. If they're not on board, they're not going to get it done, because it's going to be like just listening to lip service right at the top, but then the ability to execute is not going to go there, and then that's why a lot of projects fail. And so you want to make sure that there is buy-in across all levels of the organization. And then don't be afraid, right? I would say that that's probably the last thing I would say, is that embrace it, right? AI can really sort of take your company to the next level of growth and unlocking value for your shareholders, for your customers. And so take advantage of that.
Alejandro, technology executive, AI entrepreneur, and partner at CXO Partners. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to have all of your links down in the description below, so be sure to check that out. Thanks again. I really enjoyed this.
Charles, it was a pleasure. Thank you.